All right, welcome into the show. So, when we started wrestling about 6 weeks ago, we did so because I, a lifelong wrestling fan, am tired of the constant negativity online. If you go to wrestling websites or listen to wrestling people that make their money online after following this stuff, they always seem miserable. They seem like they don't really like it anymore. I just wanted to have a podcast that celebrates wrestling from one diehard fan of the platform to a lot of other diehard fans. And so we started it, and it's been great for 6 weeks, but we knew that eventually we were going to have guests. And when you talk about guests, why not start with the biggest star in the history of the business? Why not go ahead and start with the number one guy? And that's what we are doing today. I'm welcoming him into wrestling right now. I'm welcoming in the star of USA Network, Straight Up Steve Austin. Season 2 just came out. It is out there. He's got huge interviews with Charlotte Flair, with Burt Kreischer, Brett Favre, with Luke Combs, Steve-O from Jackass. He is, of course, the legendary, the Hall of Famer, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Thank you very much for being here, Stone Cold. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on here on the show and helping me push my show that's coming up here pretty quick. And I love the name of your show because I always call it Pro Wrestling.
I know. Rasslin so I grew up in Mississippi, and I grew up in the watching the Memphis territory and Continental out of Alabama, and it was never professional wrestling to me. It was always let's go to the Rasslin show. And that's what happened Friday and Saturday night. When you went down there, somebody was going to lose an eye, some grandmother was going to hit somebody with a wheelchair, something like that was going to happen. So I'm an old school wrestling fan. That's what I am.
Absolutely, I have too. So we're barking up the same tree.
So I have, I've been a fan for a long time, my entire life. I started being a fan back in '86, '87 with Hogan and Savage and Steamboat, and of course I was coming of age in the Attitude Era when you guys took it through the moon. And I always told myself, Brandon, if you ever get to talk to Stone Cold Steve Austin, there are a couple of questions you must ask him, and I'm about to ask you right now. So here we go.
Gotcha.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. How did you not break into laughter when you hit Vince McMahon with that bedpan?
Man, I couldn't because it was such a serious angle. When people look at that, just the act of hitting a guy with a steel bedpan, it's funny. And obviously the acoustics were funny because that was a real noise that, the stainless steel bedpan made from connecting with his skull. But man, when you're shooting a major angle and there's comedic elements to it to the fans, but to me, I'm dealing out punishment. So From there to the foot to, the enema at the end, pounding on the foot, it was all pure business to me.
I love the idea of
business is serious.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of it being pure business. But over in the corner, you've got Yerpel the clown, and you've got Mick Foley wearing a sock on his hand. But you knocked the shit out of him with that bedpan.
Yeah, and on a side note, while Yerpel was doing her thing, me and Mick were in this little bitty bathroom together because there was nowhere else for us to go. And these two big guys in this very small bathroom, and we're talking and we're very close to each other. And he pulls the sock out and he puts his hand in it and he starts telling me, this is going to be my new finisher. And I'm saying, you're kidding me.
Right.
And we're laughing our asses off inside that bathroom like a couple of kids. Finally had to beat on the door and say, hey, y'all shut up so Vince can film his other stuff so we can get to you.
So you were the first person to ever see Sacco in that bathroom as you guys were getting ready to go out there, and you had to think there's no way this is going to work, and it's the biggest thing in Mick Foley's career.
No, I told him right there. I said, dude, this will work. This is going to be amazing, and it was. I knew it right off the bat.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty cool because it did. It worked immediately. The next Monday, there were Sacco 316 signs in the crowd. Everybody was going crazy. My second question for you is, how incredible was it to lay in a pool of your own blood at WrestleMania 13 with the sharpshooter, knowing that you guys just pulled off one of the greatest matches in history? How awesome was that?
It was really cool because I've said that in the past when I was laying there in a pool of blood. And finally, Ken Shamrock broke Brett off of me, and they did that little do-si-do and the altercation that they had, and I just had to stay down. And finally, then Brett got out of the ring, and finally Shamrock left, and I was just laying there. And in my whole career, that was most likely the most satisfying moment I'd ever been through because we rocked the crowd. We had them from start to finish. When I started bleeding, they really came. And God dang, when I was trying to get out of that sharpshooter, I would have never imagined back then or while we were doing it that my face with that blood would become one of the most iconic images in the history of pro wrestling. And yeah, laying in that pool of blood, and it was a good pool of blood too. I felt relief. I felt joy that we had accomplished successfully a double turn, because a double turn don't happen too often, and it damn sure don't happen at the top level.
No, and especially with somebody as established as a face as Bret Hart was at that time. I mean, he was Mr. WWF or Mr. WWE at the time, and you guys were able to switch that. It was beautifully done. It's my choice for the greatest WrestleMania match ever. I go back and forth. My two favorites are Savage Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 and then you guys at WrestleMania 13. So I've always wanted to ask you that because it's the only career in the world where you can be laying in a pool of blood and that is your most successful thing you've ever done. To that point,
it is.
Yeah,
it's
an odd business in that way, in that you never know what's going to be the turning point. But with your career, and you obviously went to heights nobody ever had gone to before. Do you think the bigger moment for you was coining Austin 316 the way you did, or then passing out on the sharpshooter for Bret Hart, or was it all just a sequential ladder for you?
Kind of a sequential ladder, like you said, but. Man, if I had never cranked out Austin 316, or because Stone Cold said so, those two,
right
moments in that promo of a match an event I was never supposed to win, those laid the groundwork, and those were my base. Doing that business with Bret and him picking me to make that comeback match at Survivor Series, whatever it was, in '96 at the Garden, that was a pivotal match. It was different things like that, but I needed all of them to make it work.
Sure. I remember the '96 match Survivor Series in the Garden, just across the street from where we sit today, and then Chicago with WrestleMania 13. And I'm going to get to a lot of questions. I'm, of course, talking to Stone Cold Steve Austin, the host of USA Network Straight Up Steve Austin. Season 2 is out right now. It's 11 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday night, Eastern and Pacific Time every Monday night on USA Network. It's just you ripping it up with guys. You got Jackass Prankster Steve-O, you got Ice-T. Tell me about the show and how much fun it is just to go up there and just do what you do.
Man, I call it a talk, basically an action adventure talk show. Me and my guest, we're gonna do a couple of activities. We're gonna drive some type of vehicle, whether it's on land or water or whatever. Do something that's maybe most likely out of my background. I'm introducing these people to, or maybe doing something we've never done before, and having a conversation while we're doing that. We had tremendous success with season 1. It's been a long time since we've been on the air due to, the COVID and everything, preventing us from filming. And man, this show is an absolute blast to film. Takes all day to film, and we worked the whole day before that to film as well. And I'm having a blast doing it, and I hope we're successful this year in the ratings, and people will remember us, and we can get season 3 out of it.
It's an awesome show. I watched the other night. You had Rob Riggle on. That was the show that accompanied Raw the other night. It was fantastic. So it's great. It looks like fun. I want to dive back into wrestling right now because professional wrestling is, like we all are with this pandemic, is going through unprecedented times where they have to do these shows without crowds. You got the biggest pops of any superstar ever. I mean, the Stone Cold Steve Austin character generated the biggest crowd reactions pretty much ever. Do you remember your first mega pop from a crowd, the first time a crowd really just came unglued when your music hit?
I can't remember the first time with that music, but I'll never forget Chicago, going back to Rosemont Horizon, where I worked with Bret on 13. That was the place where I finally, was out there. We were working a tag, and I wasn't really on top yet, but when I got into the ring, things started happening and people started making noise. And that's when, dude, if you're out there in the ring, if you're the wrestling fan that you say you are and growing up down there in the South, when you're out there in the ring, you're feeling everything. You're hearing everything. You're making decisions based on what is going on. And if you're not, you're doing it wrong. If you're just going through the motions, and going through the motions don't sell tickets. When I felt and heard those people making the noise they're making in Chicago, that's when I knew that I was starting to get over with people, and they were starting to say, "Hey, man, this Stone Cold is something else."
So you mentioned that about working with the crowd and getting those reactions. Can you imagine having to work today without the crowd? Because what these guys and gals are going out there doing, and they're putting on an entertaining product, it's still good, but they don't have the crowd to play off of. How hard would that be?
It's extremely hard, and I take my hat off to the men and women down there that are doing it. But now that they've created Thunderdome, they can simulate, what the desired response would be, and so I think that's a tremendous help for me as I watched this past Monday. It adds tremendously to the viewing of it because wrestling without noise just ain't the same, and you really need a crowd for it. I remember back in the days when we used to do, those TV tapings in Memphis on Saturday mornings. There's only, I don't know, 200 people in there, but it's pretty intimate setting. And, they make a little bit of racket. And you rely on those people. So it's a tough time for everything. But if you're into something where you're performing and you're used to doing it in front of a crowd, hey, it sucks. I went down there and cut a promo when that first happened. And I didn't even want to do the promo. I wanted to do an interview with Byron Saxton. But I went and did the promo for Vince, and playing it to a live crowd, and it was bad material to begin with. It was not good at all.
Man, so watching everything you just said, I mean, I feel everything you said, but watching the last year without crowds, Drew McIntyre, who has ascended to the WWE title, and his first breakthrough, his first big run with the title has been without crowds. So he's had to be the face of the company for the first time in this situation. I think he's done one hell of a job. I'm curious to see what you think of the way Drew McIntyre has taken the ball and run with it.
Man, I give him an A+. I love his promos. I love his character. He's well defined. He looks fantastic. Everything is put together from a work standpoint. Everything he does is very believable. He works from that kind of psychology. He's all about respect. When he talks about the title, it's about honor and respect. And I think he's doing a fantastic job. I watched his match with Keith Lee the other day, and I thought it was a hell of a match. And Keith Lee's a little bit of a limbo or transition with his character on the indie scene. That kid's a good worker, but he's not quite where Drew's at. And I thought it was a very competitive match. And with being in the Thunderdome, with that noise really helped the match. But he's doing about as good a job as you can ask anybody to do. And Drew McIntyre is the right guy at the right time for WWE, and he probably will be for quite some time.
So one of my favorite shows on WWE Network is your Broken Skull sessions, your interviews where it's just two guys sitting there shooting the shit about wrestling and just talking wrestling, how much they love the business. You've had The Undertaker on there multiple times. You had Drew on there. I believe you got Bailey coming up very soon. I love the one you did with Drew. It seems like you have a great respect for the fact that he came up as a hot shot and then kind of went down a little bit, had to go find himself. It's kind of similar to your story as you were at WCW and you're a great wrestler. You went to ECW and found the character, and then you got to WWF. You were the ringmaster, but eventually you found it and broke through. Do you see a similarity the way he had to do things?
Yeah, there's a similarity in some respect, but he was truly the chosen one. When Vince saw that guy, he goes, "This is going to be my guy," and then didn't really go that way, and then they let him go. And then that's one of the things that I respect most about Drew. There's many things that I respect about him, but when he went down to the UK to go do that IWC ICW pay-per-view that they put on literally 2 to 3 weeks after WWE let him go, dude, he lit that place on fire, and he turned it into a movement and a thing, and they brought his ass back, and he's been on fire, ever since. Whereas kind of for me, when I got into WCW, I was a world television champion, and I won that from Bobby Eaton, and I didn't deserve to be in the ring with Bobby Eaton. But so they gave me a push, but it wasn't never like I was going to be Plan A or world champion or anything like that. So I don't ever think I was the chosen one. I think, I was always judged as being not marketable. But then again, it wasn't the right package being presented, in its day and time.
Right. So but you eventually figured out whatever it was with you. You figured it out, and then the rest is history. And I just want to reiterate right there, beautiful Bobby Eaton, one of my favorite wrestlers, incredible wrestler, Huntsville, Alabama. Bobby Eaton. I loved everything from the Midnight Express, and then his singles runs there and in WCW. I love Bobby Eaton. But I want to go from champ to champ now. We talked about Drew. Roman Reigns is somebody that, there were some chosen one elements to him too. He was a face. He main evented multiple WrestleManias. It never 100% clicked with fans. I mean, he's been a big star for a while, but now he is on the heel side doing this character where he's the head of the table, the tribal chief. I think it's some of the best work of his career. He's the Universal Champ. I think Roman Reigns is also doing a hell of a job at the top of the card. I'm anxious to see what you think about his work right now.
Well, his work has always been really good. But his character work, now that we kind of really know who he is, and Vince back in the day never would pull the trigger on turning him heel because he's a good-looking guy. He can work. You see him walking through an airport, like, God dang, who's that? He's got to be a professional athlete. So he had the looks, the size, the work, everything. But because Vince was pushing him so hard, people rebelled and wanted to not like him. But Vince wouldn't really commit to turning him heel. And when they tried, it was almost like a half-assed effort. So now with Paul Lee, I think Paul Lee helps, I don't want to say ground, but he gives him a base. And I think he enhances Roman. Or now that he's aligned with Paul, it's like, oh, okay, it's just a different spin. But Roman's doing the work. They're talking together, but the presentation is authentic. And now it's coming off like it should.
I think one of the best ways to put it is when you cross over and you align yourself with Paul Heyman, it legitimizes you as a heel. It legitimizes you as somebody who's a no-good son of a bitch, where Roman kind of needed that to get him started. Now, he's coming off as a no-good son of a bitch on his own quite well, but Paul Lee is what kind of legitimizes that and says, well, if he's with Paul Heyman, this guy's an asshole.
Well, and so we got to give Paul Lee a little bit of credit because, that's a great manager's job, but to keep the attention and the focus on the guy, and that's what's being done. But I think, I agree with you. I think that this is Roman's best work in the ring and as a character, and being pushed in the fashion that he should be pushed.
Yeah, his match at TLC with Kevin Owens, or his whole program with Kevin Owens, I think has been fantastic. I thought it was really good, and Roman's been killing it with the Uso stuff. It's all been good. I want to go back to your career real quick. I want to thank you on a personal level. Wrestlemania 14 happened in 1998. It's when you won the belt for the first time from Shawn Michaels. I was a senior in high school in West Point, Mississippi, and I invited everybody to come to my house to watch the Wrestlemania 14, and the hottest girl in school came over to watch you win the title, so I appreciate that.
You got it.
It was the one and only time she was in my bedroom, so I just want to give you credit for that. It was WrestleMania 14 at Boston. You knew you had been coming up the card. You knew you were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you find out you're going to be the guy. You're going to go over Shawn. You're going to have the championship. Do you get to stop and be satisfied, or does it immediately become pressure?
No, it's kind of really neither one. It wasn't it. Getting to the ring and having a match was kind of, the issue at hand. And I think if it had been anybody other than me, I don't know if Shawn would have dropped the title. And he didn't really appear to want to drop it to me, but nonetheless he did. And the match was okay. I remember going, right up to Vince after the match, as before we went to the press conference, and man, that match sucked because it wasn't what we could have delivered. I've worked with Shawn all over the United States in house shows, and we ripped it up. And, he wasn't in a great place. And so the match was what it was, but it was a means to an end and getting me the championship. And so I didn't feel any pressure right then at all because I was so on fire. The timing was right for Stone Cold to be the world champion. There wasn't time to be satisfied because there was so much work to do on the backside of that victory. So, yeah, that's how I answer that question.
Did you prefer holding the title or chasing the title? Because I know it makes sense to prefer holding the title, but chasing the title is also, from a wrestler, it's got to be a great the fans are salivating for you to get it. Is it better to hold it or chase it?
Man, they're both good, but what are you better at? And as I had Undertaker on Broken Skull Sessions, I love being the world champion just because it's quite an accomplishment. But I think I was better on the chase, and Undertaker felt he was better on the chase as well.
I wonder how many people feel that, because it really feels like a lot of people feel that. And I have no basis for that. I haven't talked to a lot of wrestlers, but it does feel like, I don't know. It seems like the hottest part of a guy's act is when he's on the chase, and it's harder to keep that up. Go ahead.
But I would say Ric Flair was better as the champ.
That's certainly right. Well, because you said it right on Broken Skull Sessions, because when you picture the Undertaker, you don't picture him wearing a belt. When you picture Ric Flair, you picture him wearing that big ass gold belt every single time. And there are some guys you picture holding the belt, some guys you don't. I got to be honest though with you, I do picture you holding that Smoking Skull belt. I picture you holding that coming out with a wild crowd.
You know, and I will say it was a good look. People liked it. They enjoyed me being the champion. It felt warranted. I was putting in the work, trying to have the right kind of matches. And I'll leave it at that. But it was a hell of a symbol. The BMF of the WWE, the toughest SOB in the ring, carrying that gold down to the ring with that music was quite a look. And it was quite a feeling, and it was a hell of a visual.
Couple more questions. I'll let you get out of here. We're talking to, of course, the great Stone Cold Steve Austin. Straight Up Steve Austin, Season 2, USA Network, every Monday night, 11 p.m. Eastern Pacific on USA Network. Check it out. It's a great show. You talked about the match with Shawn, and he had the back issues and other issues in 98, whatever. But you just acted like you didn't really like it. Are there any matches you look back on your career and wish you could redo?
Well, I wanted WrestleMania 19 with The Rock, which is my final match, to be a little bit better or a little bit more elaborate than it was. But, I'd spent the night before in the emergency room of the hospital, and, we put together that match, and I've watched it back maybe 2 times. What I remember, it was better than I remembered, but not as good as it could have been. Like a 17 was kind of a classic, almost in the vein of a Steamboat Savage. Although very different, because that was an awesome match. So maybe redo 19.
Well, having watched that match in 19 at least 275 times, I got to tell you, it was pretty damn good. WrestleMania 19 as a whole, very underrated. I loved that match. But again, if anybody in the world is comparing it to 17, I mean, 17 was like the peak of Superman and Batman getting together. You and The Rock. I mean, you guys were just. I think that's one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time too. Of course, that was the heel turn, but the roof still blew off the building, and it was still just an incredible match.
And and on a note, if I could go back and redo, the match at SummerSlam where I got dropped on my head, not because of the injury, but man, me and Owen were having a hell of a damn match, and we probably had about 5 or 7 more minutes to go, and then that happened, so it kind of ruined the match. It ultimately forced me into retirement, but it also forced me into a brawling style, which enhanced the character. So there's a lot of different things that came out of that match, but it'd been cool just to finish the match like we wanted to, and both shake hands afterwards and say, God damn, that was good.
It really is remarkable that you broke your neck in that match and came out hotter than you went in. I don't know of anybody else's career where they got hurt on that big stage like that, and then a month later you're stunning Vince in the Garden, and the shit's going from 9.5 to 11 just like that. A couple more questions. You talked about Undertaker. You did Broken Skull Sessions with him. I think you've done 3 episodes with him, or you did 1, and then at the end of his career you did that big long one, which was fantastic. So he just retired. You saw it at Survivor Series. You asked him on Broken Skull Sessions what was he thinking when he retired. What were you thinking watching The Undertaker go out like that? He had 30 years on top, which is incredible, unbelievable. What were you thinking watching this guy go out on top of the business?
It's time.
Yeah.
It's time. I'd talk with him, and Mark and I, we rarely talk. We've been talking on Broken Skull Sessions, but he knew it was time, and he was satisfied, and he was happy. He was completely fulfilled. And so that's what I thought, like, hey, you know what? More power to you. Congrats. Congrats on a hell of a run. Probably, one of the single greatest careers in the history of the business.
Certainly. I can't, 30 years, always near the top of the card. Of course, you had a great career, Rock. Pretty much everybody from your era you can put down as having a remarkable career. I just have one question about your era in wrestling. Whose finishing move was the worst to take? when you talk about, you had the tombstone pile driver from Undertaker, you had the rock bottom, which looked like, kind of taking a nap sometimes. You had, I wouldn't want Mick Foley sticking his hands in my mouth. A lot of them, I certainly wouldn't want Rikishi sticking his asshole on my nose, even though that wasn't his finisher. What was the worst finisher to take?
Because I was so hot back in the day, I didn't take a whole lot of finishes.
Oh, that's a good point.
But, to your point, and Taker was always cool with that. I never had to take the stink face. Foley got me a couple times with the mandible claw. And if it was anybody other than Mick, well, now in 2021, you just think germs everywhere, but you don't really think like that, back in the day. But anytime someone's sticking their finger in your mouth or a sock, that's not great. But, shit, everybody loved Mick to death. So I can't say that I didn't enjoy or couldn't stand anybody's finish.
So there was the Zamboni, there was the monster truck, there was the beer truck, there was the cement truck. It goes on and on and on of things you did to terrorize Vince McMahon. Did you ever drive something that never made it to TV? Did you ever try something that just didn't quite get there, or you always went balls out and just did it?
No, I've always had the ability to, because I've always driven machinery as a kid growing up in South Texas, from, working on a freight dock and driving forklifts and tractors and hauling hay. That's kind of built in my DNA. The one thing that I wasn't able to drive was when I had the buried alive match with Undertaker. They wanted me to bury him with that backhoe, and I got on it, and the hydraulics were so severe that I couldn't quite get them delicate enough. I would have demolished the Undertaker had I driven that backhoe, and I flat out just said I won't do it, and that's why they had the driver came in there. So the backhoe is the only thing that I couldn't drive.
I mean, those are tough. I mean, my uncle drove one for years, and I still don't think he got it right. So last couple of questions here. I got to get to what I want to talk about before we get out of here, because I know I'll never have Stone Cold Steve Austin again. Did you ever laugh? I know you said everything's business, but did you ever give Rock the stunner? And then when he did the exaggerated fall afterwards, did you ever look at him like, all right, that's a little bit much?
Never. Man, I loved it the way he would cascade off them damn ropes all over the ring. I mean, because he made it a thing before it ever. I mean, because no one ever did it like that. Scott Hall could get that great height, and then he'd come down, but
Kurt Angle did as well. Kurt Angle was very good at taking it.
Yeah, but Rock was the OG of doing the crazy bump for it. And because of our chemistry, because of the nature of our characters, and because it was him, it was money.
All right, so it is USA Network's Straight Up Steve Austin. They are in Season 2 right now. Season 1 was fantastic. Season 2 airs Mondays, 11 p.m. Eastern Pacific on USA Network. Season 2 guests include Hall of Famer Brad Favre. You got Charlotte Flair, Joel McHale, Steve-O from Jackass. You've got Tiffany Haddish, Burt Kreischer. How much fun was it to do this Season 2?
An absolute blast, because I think, in Season 1, people didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. And, with Season 2, you had whole seasons worth of stuff to look at and research. Hey, let me check this out before I make a decision. So they knew that, we're going in to have a good time. We're going in to shine a light on them and to hear their stories, and it's all about them. And at the end of the day, it's about having a good time. And I tell everybody, on my crew, and I tell my guests when I meet them, I say, hey, man, if we don't have a blast doing this, we're not doing it right. So, we're genuine in that we want to have a good time, and we're genuine that we want people to have a good time, doing the show, and to put out a great product that people will tune into and have fun watching.
All right, that's awesome, man. You can tell the fun comes right through the screen. You can tell you love what you're doing. I appreciate it. Obviously, one of the greats of all time and the first guest ever to appear on wrestling, and for that, I truly appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Hey, man, appreciate you being a fan of the business and such a fan of, the current stuff that's going on, and following my career so close. I appreciate you.
All right, that is Stone Cold Steve Austin, and this is Rasslin.